In a world full of imposters, how do we know when we're being real? In a world full of so much pain, will these drugs really help us heal? What did Jesus and Buddha say about our suffering and about our light? Isn't it turning our judgments to acceptance? Or are we more concerned with being right? Is self-love that elusive? Are we really that hard to forgive? We pay for some mistakes 1,000 times and miss 1,000 moments for us to just live. We get distracted by so many things every day. So let this podcast put us in park. But keep the seatbelt buckled tight and welcome to the light and the dark. Hey everyone, hope we're all having a great day filled with many smiles. My name is Vinny and welcome to another episode of The Light and the Dark. I'm working on that, so drop a comment, let me know what you think. The Light in the Dark is brought to us by G Level. If this is your first time joining, welcome. And if this is not your first time joining, welcome back. This episode is called Thy Will Be Done. Last episode, I went over the perspective of heaven and hell existing in the mind. And this episode, I want to talk about, it's called the Lord's Prayer. This prayer can be found in Matthew 6, 9 through 13. And depending on the version that you're reading, it might be a little bit different, some of the words, but I'm going to talk about the one that I say when I pray, the one that I grew up on, and kind of interpret it. Going through a lot of the verses and going through the Bible again and reading it again, it makes me think about what I'm reading with a perspective of other things that I've learned throughout my journey. And every time I pray, I start my prayer with this prayer. And one night I'm sitting in bed and I'm like, what am I actually saying? Like, I just go through it so quick because that's the norm. That's what I was taught. That's what I do. And I sat there one night and I'm like, let me break this down piece by piece, the way that I understand things now, and let me see what is put in my heart and what, kind of comes through. That's what this episode is going to be about. So, buckle up and let's go. So, again, I'll put verses above. I wrote some of them down, so I will try to read them as I go through it. Maybe you're driving in the car listening to it and you can't really look at the screen, so I'll try to say the verses as I go through them as well. This prayer starts off, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Now, like I said, I'll break it down line by line. So, first one, Our Father, which art in heaven. Those of you who listen to my last podcast know that heaven and hell exist within us. Mindset, and just kind of a mindset, but also feelings, emotions, depending on what state that we're in, but exist internally. So that's kind of the beginning. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Hallowed is holy or sacred. So if heaven exists within us, then we're praying internally to the Father, which is that fragment of God within us, which is love. We're praying to love, that we live in a state of heaven. And that's kind of the holiness within us. So, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. A couple of the versions took out thy and they switched it with your. I prefer thy because thy refers to ourself. Thy is like thyself. And when we say your, we're putting everything external. And although I do believe that God is everywhere and every energy, we're all connected. I do believe, though, that that fragment of God that exists within us and our free will is what it's actually referring to. So, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This even touches a little bit of psychology, because when we consider heaven internal, right? What we think, what we believe outwardly projects. Psychology actually is called projection. So, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as is in heaven is basically what we believe, what we feel, what we, our kingdom internally, and what we will inside. That's what's going to be as on earth. And Jesus talks about a lot of things like the belief of a mustard seed, and we can move mountains. A lot of things point to belief, because what we believe internally to be true, not only do we project externally, but also God or the universe is going to open up doors for us and guide us, because what we believe, what we want, we can have. And I believe that that's what this part is referring to. So if we believe it in our mind, we believe it in our heart, it'll be projected on earth. So next is, give us this day our daily bread. I'm going to talk a little bit about that before I go on to the next one. So our daily bread is kind of what we need every day to survive, to thrive, to grow, to continue being nourished and have the strength to carry on. Now, this real world today, how it's interpreted to me, is more spiritual bread. It's having that bread of Jesus talking about forgiveness. So every day we start with our daily bread, every night, and what it allows us to do is reset. We kind of reset that hunger every day and just replenish forgiveness, love. And there's a couple of verses that I actually want to bring up on this. So first, we talked about forgiveness, talked about the spiritual aspect of bread. And in John, I got my phone back here. In John 6:27, Jesus says, "Do not work for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you." A lot of times we interpret that the spiritual bread is actually physical bread, but remembering that everything on this earth is going to perish. Everything. The only thing we're really building and growing is our spirit. Our spirit and our soul that exists within us is really the only thing that we either build or take away from every day. And those feelings guide us, right? Jesus left that breadcrumb trail. And when we realize that that daily bread pushes us to forgiveness, we can kind of reset, because if we constantly live in a state of regret and sadness and pain, we're not in that state of heaven, so we can never actually reset. So we really can't build our soul and our spirit stronger and brighter and feel that fragment of God within us as much as we could. So that's what Jesus is talking about in here. Look for the food that brings eternal life, and that food is love, is forgiveness, is that spiritual growth in that journey by following our moral compass. Next, we look at John 6:35, and that's where Jesus actually says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. Again, when we go to Jesus, there's nothing to hunger, because when we hunger on this earth, we're looking for earthly pleasures. I think we've all felt that hole inside of us that we try to fill, whether it's with money or drugs and alcohol or sex or houses and cars and this and that. And we get these things and we're like, great. And then a couple weeks later, we just feel those same feelings. Okay, now what? We achieved this. Okay, well, now what? So when we look for that, we're going to constantly hunger because that hole cannot be filled with earthly things. But through Jesus and that bread of life that actually feeds our soul and our spirit, when we do things that we're passionate about, when we do things that we love, when we do things that embody love and build our soul, that's how we're filling that hole. That's how we're filling that hunger. And for the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Now, he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Again, when we interpret heaven as internal, let's say heaven's our mind, right? It's our consciousness. It's that spark in the mind that gives consciousness. So, for the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. The only reason we even know that we exist in this world is because of consciousness. Because we have that fragment of God that gives us consciousness, that allows us to wake up every day and look at this world and look at this life. We don't remember what it was before that, and we have thoughts of what it could be after death, but this moment, this life right now is what we have. So he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world is basically saying the mindset is mindset's heaven, and when we have that consciousness, it gives life to our world, to everything in front of us, to everything that exists to us. This is our world, and this is what we've been blessed with. So that's just a couple of things on our daily bread, and just a kind of reminder of how important it is to follow those passions and follow that true daily bread that's going to feed our soul and not leave us hungry and looking for more earthly desires and earthly pleasures. So forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. This is forgiveness. Forgiveness, forgiveness, forgiveness. I remember Andy Mineo has a line. He says, if we have unforgiveness in our heart, ain't no room for love. You'll hear me reference Andy Mineo a lot because Andy Mineo, hands down, has guided me through some pretty dark times and helped me in many ways. And I can kind of see his struggles too. And it's always, I love when we kind of get guidance from somebody, but we also get to see that that's a real person. Because sometimes when we get guidance or follow somebody or they help us, we put them on a pedestal. And then when we find out they're a real person, we're so crushed. But Andy Mineo, I believe, has done a good job of showing that he's a real person. And these are real things he's going through too. And this is, what he's doing, what he believes, what he feels. And so forgiveness. Forgiveness, forgiveness. Now, forgiving others of trespasses as we are forgiven. So if we don't have forgiveness in our own heart, whether it's for us or external, right? When it's not gonna, whether it's one way or the other, it's not gonna line up. Like if we have no forgiveness for others, we're really not gonna be able to forgive ourselves because we're gonna still hold that judgment we hold for others for things in our life and vice versa. So what we project inward or what we feel, believe inward, it's what we project outward. There's no running or escaping that. We can definitely be in situations where we can hide it a little bit, but we can't hide those feelings from ourselves. And I think that's the power of God being within us because we can't hide the feelings from ourselves. We can lie to ourselves as much as we want, but we know we're lying. So remember, we want to be forgiven. And in order for us to truly be forgiven, we need to forgive others. Psychology calls it projection. If we project what we feel internally, externally. So if we're going to project something, project growth. Project learning. Right? Project learning, project growth, project forgiveness. and then allow that to come back at us, and allow that to, well, I say come back at us, but allow that to be within us and give back to ourselves as well. So give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. This one I feel like is powerful because it's literally saying in the prayer to God, it is to lead us away from temptation, deliver us from evil, because that evil and the temptations also exist within us. Remember, heaven and hell exist within us. So we have those temptations internally, and we're asking God, we're asking that fragment of God that's in us, that is fueling us, and that's giving us love and Jesus and these breadcrumb trails to pull us away from those temptations, to give us that strength to deliver us from that. And instead of us following that evil, to follow more of the good, and follow that fragment of love within us, instead of the ego and all these drives for earthly things that are not going to fill that hole again. Now, with me, because of how I feel about psychology and the brain and words, I actually reword this when I pray. I say, and lead us into acceptance and love forever and ever. I'm thinking about changing acceptance to courage, but for now I say acceptance. Some I'll reevaluate. As I'm writing this stuff down, I'm like, what other word? Because it's very courageous to show love, especially because a lot of the times we don't really feel. I don't want to say we don't feel. Maybe we don't. Maybe we're not in certain moments paying attention to the feelings of love within us. So it winds up creating a lot more pain and anger and these things that we then have to, we then get to overcome, and we get to grow through them. So courage is very, very important when we want to walk that path, or try to follow that breadcrumb trail, because we're going to fall off the path, and we need to have the courage to jump back on it. The last part is not actually something I say. I know my father says it. I remember hearing him one time praying, and I was like, man, what is he saying at the end of that? And that is, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. And when I read that, and I kind of first read that after I heard him say that, and breaking it down now, again, that word thigh, because thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. The kingdom is this body that we're walking here with. God's given us our kingdom to walk around with. God's given us the power to create, the power to live this life, and also the power to feel the love, spread the love, and intensify the love. And I believe that that's just a reminder that it all exists within us. And it's pretty amazing. So when I lay down and say my prayers at night, when I read that, this is the way that I interpret it. God is always within all of us. No matter how rough our life might be looking, no matter how crazy a situation, I know there's people out there going through things that are just extremely tough. I heard a story the other day from somebody that I didn't know happened. Something they experienced with someone close to them passing away, and it just broke my heart. And those are things that, honestly, we never really know what other people are experiencing. So understanding that God's within us, and we have that power to just spread that love, share that smile, and do everything we can to, like my dad would say, to glorify God. And we glorify God by spreading love. We glorify God by forgiveness. And I think it's so underrated. And we need to, I think that we, especially me, need to put more into it, because we have it. And man, it feels so much better to smile. Like, right? Is there anybody out there that feels like it doesn't feel good to smile? Maybe if we're forcing a smile because we're actually sad inside, so it just feels like force and we feel like, ah. But when we genuinely smile, we genuinely laugh and feel love, and it just feels great. So, laugh some more, smile some more. As always, smile big and smile often.